And before I get to Ukraine, I want to talk a little bit about U.S.-Russian relations that stem from all of this. During the Bush administration, started off with friendly relations with Russia, 2001, 2002. But after the invasion of Iraq, they became increasingly hostile. Russia was very much opposed to the Iraqi invasion, tried to argue against it. And so when President Obama took office in 2009, we had what I would call a brief shining moment for about 2 years. 1 month after Obama took office, he announced that the United States was going to press the reset button on U.S.-Russia relations, meaning, of course, trying to restore them to a positive, constructive, cooperative venture, and did that. And for a while, good things happened. We had a New START treaty where the United States and Russia, for the first time in 15 years, came to a new arms control treaty, which reduced the number of nuclear weapons, but more importantly, set up a bilateral cooperative verification system. They could verify our weapons, we could verify compliance in Russia. So that was a very big point. We had a nuclear summit in which Russia participated and worked cooperatively to try to reduce the danger of loose fissile material around the world. And we had a UN resolution, unanimous, arguing that the world should be moving towards the elimination of nuclear weapons. Russia was an active part of that resolution, not only voted in favor of it, made a speech in favor of it. Then, after this 2 years of what I'm calling a brief shining moment, things began to revert to hostility again. Suspicion and hostility. One important element of that was NATO expansion, bringing NATO closer and closer to the borders of Russia. In the case of Latvia, on the borders of Russia. In the case of Poland, close to the borders of Russia. And during the second term of the Bush administration, some talk about making Ukraine a member of NATO. It's interesting to speculate on where we would be today if indeed NATO had gone ahead and brought Ukraine in as a member. There's no question, if you look at what's happening today, you can see why Ukraine wanted to be a member. Feeling very nervous about the big brother that was east of them. But Russia, in any event, was very opposed to expansion of NATO and considered it as a threat to them. We were deploying a ballistic missile defense system in Eastern Europe, including Poland, which we explained to Russia was to protect ourselves against possible missiles in Iran, but Russians saw it as a threat to their nuclear deterrence. And we were promoting democracy all over the world. In Libya with armed forces, in supporting the Green Revolution and the Orange Revolution with words and money, but not military forces. Putin's re-election was followed by very significant protests in the street. The Russians who had made this bargain were beginning to wonder whether it was such a good bargain after all. And there were more than 100,000 protesters in the streets of Russia protesting Putin's re-election, which they saw as a fraud and a farce. I happened to be visiting Russia the day, 2 days after the biggest protest demonstration. And I was meeting with my Russian colleagues in, I guess it was a fourth-story room with big windows overlooking Red Square. And there we looked out, we saw another protest forming. This one was a pro-government demonstration. And it was very well-dressed, tidy people carrying signs that were printed nicely, walking down, arguing for the government. There were a total of about 100 of them. And one of my Russian colleagues who was looking out the window with me commented to me, "I'm surprised they couldn't afford to buy more protesters than that." Those protests surprised a lot of people, and we all thought maybe they were going somewhere. But Putin put them down with force. I said before he was willing to and does use force anytime he needs to, and he saw this as a direct threat not only to the stability of Russia, but of course his tenure, and he put it down strongly. Important for you to understand in terms of U.S.-Russia relations, if Putin believed then and believes now that the United States was very much behind those protests. We were funding them, we were supporting them, we were instigating them. And that paranoia, as long as he had that feeling, you can believe there's not going to be any reasonable basis for positive U.S.-Russian relations. I want to illustrate that point with one anecdote. Some years ago, 3 or 4 years ago, we appointed a new ambassador. The United States appointed a new ambassador to Russia. His name was Mike McFaul, who was a Stanford professor, Russian linguist, Russian historian, very knowledgeable in Russian history. Wonderful choice for the job. So Mike was very enthusiastic about this. He arrived in Moscow, and the headlines greeting him in the papers, and remember these are state-controlled newspapers, were "New ambassador here to overthrow the Putin regime." What a way to greet a new ambassador. Now, Mike has tried very hard, and he's done the best with the bad situation, but it never really warmed up to a reasonable positive relationship. He was fighting almost impossible odds. Just incidentally, the footnote to that story is that Mike will be arriving back at Stanford, I think, this week or next week. He agreed to stay on in Russia through the Olympics, so he is either on his way home now or maybe he's already back by now. So that is a background about Russia that you need to know to understand what is happening in Ukraine today.